Hi there! Today, we're diving into a powerful tool for organizing your code, lists. Do you remember working with variables like strings, integers, and booleans? Well, imagine being able to store multiple items in just one variable. That's where lists come in handy. From creation to complex manipulations, we're going to cover everything you need to master them. Let's get started. Before we dive into today's topic, let's take a moment to revisit what we covered in our last series, Mastering Loops in Python. We explored how for loops can automate repetitive tasks when you know the exact number of iterations, and how while loops offer the flexibility to keep running as long as a condition is true. We also delved into powerful control statements like break, continue, and pass, which give you the ability to fine-tune your loop's behavior. In our final project, we combined for and while loops in a guessing game, showcasing how these two loop types can work together to create dynamic and interactive programs. This project was a great way to see the practical application of loops in action. Now normally we go over the quiz answers from the last video, but since some viewers might be watching these videos independently or aren't as interested in the quiz, we've placed the answers in the description below. Feel free to check it out if you're curious about how many you got right. If you haven't watched the 3-part series on loops yet, I highly recommend it. Understanding loops is fundamental to programming, and mastering them will definitely make you a more proficient Python developer. Creating a list in Python is as simple as assigning a variable and enclosing the items in square brackets. You can mix and match data types like numbers, strings, or booleans, but most commonly lists contain items of the same type for consistency. Let's create a shopping list to see how easy it is. And just like that, we have a fully functional list ready to be used. Now that we have our shopping list, let's talk about how to access specific items. In Python, every item in a list is assigned an index, which is just a number that tells us where the item is located in the list. It's important to remember that Python starts counting at 0, not 1, so the first item in a list isn't at position 1, it's at position 0. For example, in our list, shopping list 0 will give us milk because it's the first item. Now what if you want to access the last item in the list? You could count the items and use the index for the last position, but there's a faster way, negative indexing. In Python, negative numbers allow you to access items starting from the end of the list. For instance, shopping list -1 gives us butter, the last item in our list. It's like saying start from the back and give me the first item you find. One of the great things about lists is how flexible they are. Just like strings, which we can manipulate using different methods, lists have their own set of methods that allow us to add, remove, or change items. Let's explore this. First, adding items to a list. If you want to add a single item, you use the append method. It adds the new items to the end of the list. So if we want to add cheese to our shopping list, we'd write shopping list append cheese, and cheese will be added as the last item. But what if you need to add multiple items at once? That's where extend comes in handy. It allows you to add more than one item to the list at the same time. For example, if you wanted to add chocolate and apples at once, you'd use shopping list extend chocolate apples. Notice we use square brackets because we're essentially adding two lists together. This merges the items from one into the original list. Next, let's talk about removing items. You can remove an item by its value with the remove method. So if you no longer need bread in your shopping list, you simply write shopping list remove bread. This removes the first occurrence of bread from the list. Notice I said first occurrence. If you have multiple breads, you will only remove the first one, counting from left to right or index 0 to the final index. Now, if you want to remove an item based on its position, you can use pop. This method removes an item by its index. For example, shopping list pop1 removes the second item in the list. Remember, Python starts counting from 0, so position 1 is the second item. Lastly, modifying items is just as easy. You can directly update an item by its index. Let's say you want to replace eggs at index 2 with cheese. You'd write shopping list 2 equal cheese. This updates the third item in the list to cheese. As all things Python, you have a big list of methods for lists, and if you want to take a look at them, guess what? You can use our reference material of choice, W3 Schools. We've already explored how powerful for loops can be for repeating actions. Now, let's use that same concept to loop through a list. When we tell Python for each item in this list, do something, it will go through each element one by one. Let's print each item in our shopping list to see it in action. This method is especially useful for working with sequences of data, making it easier to process large amounts of information efficiently. Now that we have covered the basics of lists, creating, accessing, and modifying them, let's put it all together with a practical example. We're going to build a simple shopping list manager that allows users to add, remove, and view items in the list. We'll also give the option to exit the program when the user is done. Here's our initial shopping list. The idea is simple. You'll be able to add items, remove items, and exit the program. We'll use a while loop to keep the program running until the user decides to exit, and within the loop, we'll provide options for adding, removing, or viewing items. This is our starting shopping list, but we want to allow the user to modify it. Let's begin with the main loop that runs as long as the shopping list has items in it. Here, we introduce len, which is another built-in function, which returns the number of items in a list. So len shopping list tells us how many items are currently in the shopping list. The loop will continue to run as long as there's at least one item in the list. This is a handy way to check if a list is empty or not. Next, we need to handle the user input. Let's look at the first case, which is removing an item from the list. When the user chooses to remove an item, we first print the current item in the list. Then, we ask them to specify which item to remove. If the item is found in the list, we use the remove method to delete it. If not, we inform the user that the item wasn't found. Now, let's handle adding new items. In this case, the user wants to add something to the shopping list. We prompt them to enter the new item, then we use append to add it to the end of the list. Finally, let's give the user the option to exit the program. When the user types exit, the loop ends using the break statement, which stops the program. And of course, we handle invalid inputs in case the user types something unexpected. If the user types anything that isn't add, remove, or exit, they get an error message asking them to try again. Once the user exits the loop, we check whether the shopping list is empty and print a final message. If all items have been removed, we let the user know the list is empty, otherwise the program ends, confirming the exit. This small program demonstrates the power of lists, loops, and conditionals working together in Python. It allows you to manipulate data interactively, giving you a hands-on way to see how these elements can be combined. You can take this further by adding features like sorting, saving lists, or even tracking quantities for each item. Python's simplicity and versatility really shines through in examples like this. I encourage you to try building your own version and see what unique features you can come up with. Here's a tip. What if you wanted to add more than one item at a time? Think about how you might achieve this. It's a great opportunity to make this example truly yours. Alright, let's test your knowledge with a quick quiz on lists. I've got 5 questions lined up to see how well you've grasped today's concepts. Let's get started. Question 1. How do you create an empty list in Python? Question 2. What will shopping list -1 return if shopping list equal milk, egg, bread, and butter? If you want to add multiple items at once to a list, which method will you use? Which method will you use to remove an item by its index in the list? What does len shopping list return if shopping list equal milk, egg, bread? Feel free to share your answers in the comments below and let's see how everyone did. This quiz is a great way to check your understanding and spark conversations with other learners. I'll go over the correct answers in the next video description, so make sure to tune in and see how you did. That wraps up our deep dive into lists in Python. We've covered the essentials, from creating and accessing lists to modifying and looping through them. Along the way, we explored practical examples, including the power of list methods like append, remove, and extend. Lists are incredibly versatile and foundational in Python, opening up endless opportunities for data handling and organization. Now it's your turn. Get creative with lists in your own projects, experiment with what you've learned, and most important, practice. I'd love to hear about your experiences. Whether you've got questions, challenges, or insights, drop them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more coding adventures. Happy coding, and I'll see you in the next dimension.